You probably looked at the title card and now you're wondering why in the world would these topics be brought up? Well, the thing about objective thinking, the topics are never going to be easy. Thinking objectively happens when you think without bias, when you base a viewpoint on facts and not emotions. It's required for all writers when hitting on serious topics. Although it's required of us, it's not easy. I could be the first to tell you that I get very emotional when writing. There are parts of my own book that I can't even read. It makes me sad or uncomfortable, but I wrote it in anyways in the hopes of sharing a viewpoint. I have no idea how else to jump in, so story time with Auntie Rose. As you guys know, I majored in communication studies and I had to take a class called rhetorical theory. Nothing too tense. You learn about the dead Greeks, Kenneth Burke, Richard Vatz, you get it. Eventually, we get to the section where we learn about the dramatistic pentad. It's a great little tool if you want to analyze a situation and break it down. Well, my professor decided that we were going to break down school shootings because that man never shied away from any tense topics. When we got to the purpose section, he wanted us to answer why school shootings happened. And he didn't want us to say because the kid was crazy or mental or whatever. He wanted us to answer how we as a society contributed to school shootings. Now this naturally bothered me and the rest of the class, like, the fuck? Clearly the answer is he's crazy and stupid and shouldn't have easy access to guns, but my professor wasn't having any of those answers. He wanted to know how it was society's fault. And I guess I'll leave you with that. Maybe you'll have an easier time answering that by the end of the video, but we'll get back to that later. For now, this is, after all, a writing channel. So let's jump into my favorite book and how objective thinking can be done well in writing. A really good question when it comes to character writing is how do we make the characters feel different? Of course, I have the video here where we discuss how we make them different in their dialogue, and this video here where we can make them different in their personalities. But here I want to discuss how do we make them different in their viewpoints, especially considering how us as people, we tend to be biased, which isn't inherently bad. Being biased is human nature. It only creates issues when we write, because now we aren't dealing with ourselves. We are now writing for multiple characters, and they can't all have the same biased viewpoint. Someone who was able to do this really well was Aldous Huxley, the author for Brave New World. Before the book, way back in the 1920s, so like 100 years ago, he worked in a chemical plant in Bellingham. What that man saw at the chemical plant concerned him so much that he wrote a book critiquing the dehumanizing aspects of scientific progress. Now, this man clearly has a bias. He hated the thought of government control and consumerism and the erasure of individuality, but if you read the book, it's not as biased as one may think. He can create characters who would gladly support government control, that would gladly get rid of individuality, and this aspect is no better demonstrated in the discussion between Mustafa Mond, who is an independent thinker and suppresses individuality to the rest of society, and John the Savage, who is also an independent thinker, but wants to share about Shakespeare, the Bible, poetry, and art. In chapter 16, these two discuss Shakespeare because in this dystopia, they done banned the book. I'll play a snippet of the audiobook so you can get a better idea of this conversation. I swear, y'all. People make animatics for Warrior Cats or Hamilton, and here I am making an animatic for some old-ass book. What brand of Nero Spicy is this? Well, enjoy.
Why don't you let them see Othello instead?
I've told you, it's old. Besides, they couldn't understand it.
Yes, that was true. He remembered how Helmholtz had laughed at Romeo and Juliet.
Well, then, he said after a pause, something new that's like Othello and that they could understand.
That's what we've all been wanting to write, said Helmholtz, breaking a long silence.
And it's what you never will write, said the controller, because if it were really like Othello, nobody could understand it, however new it might be. And if it were new, it couldn't possibly be like Othello.
Why not? Yes, why not? Helmholtz repeated. He too was forgetting the unpleasant realities of the situation. Green with anxiety and apprehension, only Bernard remembered them. The others ignored him.
Why not? Because our world is not the same as Othello's world. You can't make flivvers without steel, and you can't make tragedies without social instability. The world's stable now. People are happy. They get what they want, and they never want what they can't get. They're well off, they're safe, they're never ill, they're not afraid of death, they're blissfully ignorant of passion and old age. They're plagued with no mothers or fathers, they've got no wives or children or lovers to feel strongly about. They're so conditioned that they practically can't help behaving as they ought to behave. And if anything goes wrong, there's Soma, which you go and chuck out of the window in the name of liberty, Mr. Savage. Liberty! He laughed. Expecting Deltas to know what liberty is, and now expecting them to understand Othello? Oh, my good boy. The Savage was silent for a little. All the same, he insisted obstinately, Othello's good. Othello's better than those feelies. Of course it is, the controller agreed. But that's the price we have to pay for stability. You've got to choose between happiness and what people used to call high art. We've sacrificed the high art. We have the feelies and the scent organ instead. But they don't mean anything. They mean themselves. They mean a lot of agreeable sensations to the audience.
So as you can see, Aldous Huxley did a great job of making Mustafa Mond and John the Savage feel like two different people. They're passionate about what they're debating. Obviously, Mr. Huxley sides with John, but the way he writes objectively allows for people to even question if Mustafa Mond was correct. He didn't write an obvious right and wrong. Instead, he laid out all the facts and asked you, the reader, who is in the right? Most people with common sense would know John is in the right, but because of how Mr. Huxley wrote the story, it doesn't come off as preachy or soapboxy. He was able to critique society without being sanctimonious, because he showed us how bad the world can get, but he didn't tell us. People listen better with their eyes. If you want to talk about racism, homophobia, society, whatever, if you want to discuss these things, it's better to show people how bad it is. And to do that, you need to jump into the quote-unquote opposition's head. How do you think like someone else who isn't yourself? This is one of the hardest skills to obtain because, like I said before, we are one person trying to think for multiple people. I have an example that I think may help. It comes from personal experience, but it's a heavy topic. If you don't want to hear a story involving this, skip to this timestamp. But yeah, okay, let's talk about it. When I was in high school, we were all mostly miserable. The school I went to had its fair share of rich kids, but it also had some kids that came from the town over. And being the kids that came from the town over, it came with some issues. Race was a factor, of course, but small things like fashion could really fuck you over as well. Wake up early to catch the bus, run a mile to class, leave late and run a mile to catch the bus back. Some days you had to do your extracurriculars, your volunteer work, plus study and do homework, and that's not even getting into home life. I'll sit here, boldface, right now and say that even though adulthood has its challenges, it doesn't light a candle to high school. Having no money, no time, no freedom. Teenage life is miserable. I think most of us who lived through that or currently living through that, we know that. Naturally, this pressure most of us felt daily allowed us for jokes about ending our lives. I remember people showing off their self-harm wounds and joking about tricking the teacher into approving a side book for silent reading. The signs were all there for many of us, but instead of therapy or discussing it, we all coped by joking about it. But the jokes pretty much stopped the moment someone from our class actually went through with it. There were many reactions, crying, guilt, confusion, but one teacher I remember started a narrative to end all that. She called our classmate selfish. It wasn't our fault that they did that. They were being selfish, And at the time, we all agreed because shifting blame onto them was easier than processing what happened. Now, as harmful as that narrative is, and trust me, that's a very harmful narrative for victims, how do we jump inside this teacher's head? Why would she say that? What we know is that she saw that student daily. She had the opportunity to say something, but she didn't because she didn't know. I'm sure she heard the jokes we'd all make in class, but never said anything. But she blamed herself regardless that this happened. Deep down, she knows that there was the vague chance that she could have stopped it, but she didn't. So instead of harboring the guilt within herself, she shifted it onto them, the victim. They were the selfish one. And we all ran with that narrative, and because we didn't think objectively about the situation. Now, before you say it, of course it's not the teacher's fault that our classmate did that, but by calling him the name selfish, it stops all real conversation. Our emotions got in the way, and now there's no measure preventing it from happening again because he's just selfish, and that's the end of the conversation. When dealing with heavy topics, labels and names don't help the conversation whatsoever. If you're an activist for topics you're serious about, you want to think objectively about it. Now, this doesn't just happen in real life. This kind of subjective labeling and name-calling bleeds into our writing as well. I'll give some more examples. Here's a wonderful show that wants to critique sexism in corporate culture and anti-Semitism in Christian-based holidays. Okay, that's a conversation worth discussing. Very important. Oh wait, it's Santa Inc. Okay, well, how about a show that discusses LGBT representation and the racial hierarchy issues in America? Oh fuck, it's Velma. The important messages that these shows want to approach are bogged down by a myriad of things, but for the purpose of this video, let's just focus on the characters. With these shows, they propped up the main character as smart and too good for this world, surrounded by usually idiots. And it's true, sexism is stupid, and so is racism, but by depicting these characters as nothing but stupid, it cheapens the conversation, and it's not objective thinking. I mean, let's go back to Brave New World and Mustafa Mon. Mr. Huxley hates the viewpoints that this character is spewing. He wrote this character, and he doesn't agree with him, but yet he wrote him to be competent. He wrote him intelligent enough to debate John the Savage, using real stances to actively engage with the narrative. If anything, John the Savage kind of looks like the idiot in the book, not being as knowledgeable about science and technology, but him bringing in his unique viewpoint, it allows him to be just as intelligent as the quasi-antagonist. I'm sure these cartoons I mentioned before could have handled LGBT themes better and racism better if they had just taken a page from Huxley's book. And that's simply by not making the opposition a bunch of idiots. Yes, showing both sides objectively. With all logic and reason at play, we are able to decide who is right. Most people know who's in the right. Now, why do we create the opposition as idiots and then cheapen our message? Simple, we look at a racist or a homophobic person and call them an idiot. We think of them as idiots and then we proceed to write them as idiots and not like real people. The debates are typically accompanied by a fallacy. There's a bunch of them that exist but aren't relevant to this video. Instead, let's focus on the straw man. We've all heard it before. A straw man is a caricature of a person, a character the author has set up in order to ridicule a particular viewpoint. Notice the word caricature, cough cough, and not a real person. If you're writing about heavy subjects, the last thing you want in your story is a caricature. Write in real people, with real arguments and real viewpoints. By doing that, you can critique the real problem and not a parody of the problem. You think it was easy for Mr. Huxley to write Mustafa Mond, a character he despises and doesn't agree with? I doubt it. But he understood that in order to get his message out, he had to think like the quote-unquote idiot. By jumping into his head, he is able to debate it more effectively. Now, I'll say that Brave New World ends with John essentially crashing out. Not a happy ending. John's viewpoints in this world is like this dude brought a McDonald's water cup to hell trying to put out all the flames. And for a lot of us writers, when we discuss society, racism, homophobia, and other intense topics, we are bringing water cups to hell. We can't put out all the flames by ourselves, but with the power of storytelling and personal experiences, we can bring awareness, but objective thinking is required. Write with your soul and heart. your anger and sadness about the things that bother you, but also never forget to seek out why these things happen. Racism is bad, but why does it still exist? Homophobia is bad, but why does it still exist? And school shootings are fucking terrible, but if you can block out your bias and emotions just temporarily so you can figure out why it still happens, you're one step closer to thinking objectively and another step closer to being a better writer. If you have a serious topic in your story that you want to discuss, for sure comment down below what it is. If you're fighting the good fight, I want to see you succeed, because writing is a weapon stronger than any hate and any injustice, and I know that you could do it. Dang, this video, bro, I swear, it's a little heavy. This one's not going to be fun to edit, I know for sure. But you guys asked me to talk about it, so I'm finally talking about it. But yeah, okay guys, I think that's it. That's the video. If you're interested, check out my book 2152, the Trifold article. It's both animated and illustrated, sci-fi and adventure. I didn't talk about this book at all. Not because it doesn't cover serious themes, but because I think the themes of this book deserve its own video one day in the distant future. Yes, there's themes of societal pressure, classism, redemption, gender identity, and racism. There's a lot that we could discuss later, but if you're curious about that now, that will be linked below, as well as the newsletter. I have a Discord for artists and writers that'll also be linked below. Like and subscribe and whatever, that is much appreciated. Have fun while creating today, and I'll see you guys later.